This is a story about beauty, not beauty as decoration, not beauty as the quality that makes something pleasant to look at, but beauty as the thing that changes the people around it, that sets things in motion, that creates situations and demands and consequences that the beautiful person did not ask for and cannot fully control. It is also a story about poetry, about the way that words, arranged with care, can carry something true across 1,000 years, can arrive in the ears of a person who was not born yet when the words were written, and still be recognized as something that speaks to exactly this moment, this feeling, this particular quality of the night. Her name was Ono no Komachi. She lived in the 9th century in the Heian capital, in the great imperial court that was, in her time, the center of everything that the Japanese world considered worth having: refinement, ceremony, poetry, and presence. She was beautiful. She was brilliant. She is still here. The Heian court. The world Komachi moved through was the world of the aristocracy at its most concentrated, its most deliberate, its most devoted to the cultivation of the beautiful. Heian Kyo, the capital of peace and tranquility, built in 794 on the grid pattern borrowed from the Tang dynasty capital of China, with the imperial palace at the north and the great avenues running south. The city organized itself around the idea of the center, the presence of the emperor, the arrangement of everything in relation to that presence. The court that surrounded the emperor was a world of its own, a world in which the correct color of your robe for the correct month was a matter of significance, in which the poem you sent in response to the poem you received was the primary way of managing relationships, of expressing feeling, of demonstrating whether you were the kind of person whose company was worth having. The poetry was not decoration. It was the currency. The person who could compose a poem of genuine quality, quickly, in the right form, with the right illusion, in response to the situation as it presented itself, was the person who held the power of being taken seriously in the world that mattered. Komachi held this power, more completely, the tradition says, than almost anyone else of her time. The Rakusen, the 6 poetry masters. In the preface to the Kokenshu, the imperial anthology of Japanese poetry, compiled in 905, Kino Tsurayuki, one of the compilers, assessed the poets of the previous generation. He named 6, the 6 poets whose work stood at the height of the tradition, whose understanding of the art had taken it somewhere new, whose poems would be read as long as people read poems. Among the 6, Ono no Komachi, the only woman. Tsurayuki's assessment of her has been quoted and discussed for 11 centuries. Her poetry moves the heart deeply, he said. It is like a beautiful woman troubled by illness. It has strength, but lacks robustness. This weakness is perhaps because it is the poetry of a woman. This assessment is complicated. It acknowledges the power of her work. It uses her beauty as a metaphor for it. It qualifies the acknowledgement with the particular diminishment that the male literary tradition applied to women's work, as if the beauty of the poetry and the frailty it attributes to the woman are the same thing, as if the two cannot be separated. What the centuries have kept is not Tsurayuki's qualification. It is the poems themselves. Komachi's poems in the Kokenshu, her poems in the Hyakunin Isshu, the 100 poems that the courtier Fujiwara no Teika selected in the 13th century as the definitive anthology of Japanese lyric poetry. Her poem is there, still there, still red. The poem, Hana no iro wa utsuri, nikeri na itazura, ni wagami yo ni furu nagame seishimani. The color of the flowers has faded already, while meaninglessly I have grown old in the world, gazing at the long rains. This is the poem that appears in the Hyakunin Isshu, the poem numbered 9, the poem that has been memorized by Japanese children for hundreds of years, that appears on the cards of the Karuta game that families play at the New Year. It is a poem about passing, not only the passing of beauty, though that is in it, not only the passing of youth, though that too. It is a poem about the gap between the attending and the attended, while I was looking at the long rains, gazing out, absorbed in the watching. Something was happening to the flowers. Something was happening to me. The color faded. I grew old, not in spite of the gazing, while the gazing. This is what the poem knows, that the attention we give to the world is the time we have, that the world changes in the light of our attention, and we change with it, and neither we nor the world is the same after the gazing as it was before. This is the poem of Komachi that has lasted. This is the quality of mind that the 11 centuries of readers have recognized as worth keeping. Who was she? This is the question that the tradition has been asking for 11 centuries and has not been able to fully answer. The historical record of Komachi is thin. We know she was a poet. We know she was considered beautiful. We know she served at the court during the reigns of emperors Ninmyo, Montoku, and Seiwa in the mid-9th century. We know she composed poems that were included in the imperial anthologies. Beyond this, speculation, legend, the accumulated stories that the centuries have added to the bare record. Where was she born? The most favored account places her birth in the northern province of Dewa, in what is now Akita Prefecture. Ogachi, in the south of Akita, has a particularly strong tradition of being her birthplace, and the connection is maintained in the landscape, springs and shrines bearing her name, the town that calls itself the place where she was born. How did she come to the capital? The tradition says she was sent to serve at court, as the daughters of provincial families of a certain status sometimes were, taken from their home landscapes and placed in the elaborate world of the imperial household, where their beauty and talent could serve the institution, and, if fortune was good, secure for their families a connection to the center of power. She arrived, she was noticed, the rest followed. The beauty. Komachi's beauty is the feature of her story that the tradition has emphasized most consistently across the centuries. The beauty that drew the poems, the beauty that drew the men, the beauty that became, as all beauty does in the Japanese tradition, something inseparable from its own passing. What did beauty mean in the Heian court? Not only the face. The Japanese aesthetic of the Heian period was more comprehensive than that. The beauty of movement, the beauty of the robe, its colors and its layering, the way the sleeve fell, the way the hem appeared at the edge of the screen, the beauty of the handwriting, the specific quality of the brushwork that revealed character and cultivation in the way the letters formed, the beauty of the poem itself, composed quickly in the moment of reception, in the exact form that the exchange required, with the illusion that showed you had read the classics, with the feeling that showed you had lived. Komachi had all of these, and she had the particular beauty that the tradition identified as hers specifically, the beauty that was also intelligence, the kind that made the men who saw her not only desire her, but fear her a little, because she was clearly more capable than they were of understanding what was happening between them. This is the beauty the tradition preserved, not the face that cannot be verified, but the mind that left the poems. The 100 Nights, the Momo Yoga Yoi, the legend that has attached itself to the name of Komachi more persistently than any other, the story that is told in the temples of Kyoto, in the festivals of Akita, in the No plays that the medieval tradition built around her figure. A man loved her. A man of the court, identified in the later tradition as Fukakusa no Shosho, the lesser captain of Fukakusa, whose feelings for Komachi were, the story says, genuine and overwhelming and entirely unreturned. He sent letters. He composed poems. He presented himself in the ways that the Heian court made available for the expression of feeling. The letter slipped under the screen, the poem attached to the branch of the seasonal flower, the presence at the ceremonies where her presence was expected. She was not moved, or she was not ready to show that she was moved, or she was testing something, wanting to understand whether what he felt was what he said he felt, whether the feeling would survive the test of time and difficulty. She said, "If you come to me 100 nights, I will receive you." He believed her. He went. Every night, from Fukakusa, his estate south of the capital, to the place where she lived, 6 kilometers of road, through whatever the weather offered. He kept count. He marked each night, each visit a notch in the wood, a stone counted, a small material record of the accumulating nights. 99? He came 99 times. 1 more remained. And then, the weather, the snow, in most versions, the storm that came down from the mountains north of the capital, that filled the road and made the journey from Fukakusa to Komachi's house the kind of journey that only the truly committed would attempt. He attempted it. Of course he did. He had come 99 times. He had come in rain, in cold, in the mud of the autumn roads. He had come when the wind was against him, and when the night was so dark the road was invisible. 1 more night. He came. He did not arrive. The versions differ on the details of what happened. In some, he froze in the snow, found in the morning still holding the marker of the 99th night. In some, the bridge was washed out by the rain-swollen river, and he was taken by the water as he tried to cross. In some, he reached her gate and collapsed there, the 100-night journey ending 1 night too soon. In all versions, he did not complete the 100 nights. He came 99 times, and the 100th was not reached, and Komachi waited, not without feeling. The tradition makes this clear in the versions that give her an inner life. She had been waiting, the later accounts say, with the particular ambivalent anticipation of a person who has made a condition and is no longer certain she wants it met. She waited. He did not come. She understood why. She mourned. What is the legend? The 100-night legend is not historical. The scholars are clear on this. The figure of Fukakusa no Shosho was created by the No tradition, by the playwright Zeami and those who came before and after him, who needed a figure to stand opposite Komachi in the plays they were writing about the nature of beauty and love and age. The legend is built on a poem. A poem in the Kokenshu, listed as anonymous, as many of the most important Heian poems are listed. Dawn. The snipe beating 100 wings. 100 wings beaten. The nights you do not come, I count them myself. This poem, and an answering poem attributed to Komachi herself, is the seed from which the 100-night tradition grew. The legend grew around the poem because the poem pointed at something real, at something that the tradition recognized as true about Komachi, even if the specific story was invented. The experience of waiting, the counting, the particular arithmetic of hope that tallies the days and the nights and what they do and do not bring. She may not have known Fukakusa no Shosho. He may not have existed, but she knew waiting. The poems make this clear. She knew the long nights and the question of who would come and whether what was felt would be acknowledged and what it cost to keep feeling it in the uncertainty. The poems of longing. Komachi's poems in the Kokenshu include some of the most direct expressions of desire in all of classical Japanese poetry. One of them, thinking of you, I fell asleep, and you came to me. If I had known it was only a dream, I would never have woken. The poem knows something about the relationship between sleep and longing, between the night and the person who is not there. In the dream, he came. In the waking, he did not. The dream was more real than the waking, in the sense that the dream gave her what the waking withheld. If she had known it was only a dream, she would have stayed. She would have chosen the dream's truth over the waking's absence. This poem has been in the world for 1100 years. It was composed in the 9th century, written down in a language that most Japanese speakers today cannot fully read without study. And yet, the feeling it describes is completely recognizable. The dream that gives you what the waking life withholds. The moment of waking that is also the moment of loss. The wish to have stayed in the dream a little longer. Everyone who has longed for someone has had this experience. Komachi gave it a form that has lasted 11 centuries. The old age. The tradition of Komachi's story does not end at the height. The Heian court, the poems, the beauty, the men who came and came again, the 100 nights. This is the first part. The second part is the falling. Komachi left the court. When exactly, the record does not say. The court life of a woman in the Heian period was tied to her usefulness, to her connection to power, to the support of whoever had brought her there, and continued to have reasons to keep her there. When these connections frayed, when the patrons died or moved on, or found other interests, the position became uncertain. When the beauty that had been the primary currency began to show the signs that beauty always shows, the position became more uncertain. She left. The legends of her later years are the legends of wandering, an old woman on the roads, not destitute in all versions, but diminished. The person who had been at the center of everything, now at the margins, now in the provinces, now in the places that the court did not think about. The proud beauty, the brilliant poet, recognized perhaps by no one, or recognized and pitied, or recognized and feared because of the ghost of what she had been. The 7 Komachi, Nana Komachi, the group of no plays that use the figure of Komachi as their central subject. 7 plays, each taking a different moment, a different aspect, a different episode from the legend of Komachi's life. The Sotoba Komachi, the Komachi at the stupa, An old woman is sitting on a wooden post by the roadside. Two priests pass. They challenge her. You are sitting on a sacred object, a stupa, a Buddhist monument. Get up. She challenges back. She argues. She reveals herself as Komachi, and then, in the way of no, she is possessed by the spirit of the Fukakusa no Shosho, who haunts her still, who speaks through her, who has not finished the 100 nights even in death. The Kaioi Komachi, the visiting Komachi. A monk encounters two wandering figures at night. They are the ghosts of Komachi and Fukakusa no Shosho, still bound to each other, still enacting the 100 nights in the realm of the dead. The monk recites the sutras. The two ghosts are released. These plays share a structure. Komachi old. Komachi haunted. Komachi stripped of the beauty that defined her at the court and left with only the intelligence and the suffering that the beauty covered. The No tradition is interested in this Komachi, the one who has outlasted her beauty, the one for whom the poems remain after everything else has gone. The Zuishinin Temple, in the Ono district of Yamashiro, in what is now the Yamashina ward of eastern Kyoto, there is a temple, Zuishinin, the temple that the tradition most closely associates with Komachi's presence, with the place where she lived during her years at the height of her influence. The temple was originally the residence of the Ono clan, the aristocratic family to which Komachi is said to have belonged, and became a temple in the 11th century, some generations after Komachi's time. But the connection was maintained. The stories were maintained. The places within the temple grounds that carry her name were maintained. The Fumizuka, the letter mound. Inside the Zuishinin grounds, a stone marker over a place where, the tradition says, the letters Komachi received were eventually buried. All those poems, all those expressions of longing and pursuit from all the men who had composed and sent, all the correspondence of a woman who was the most written to person of her era, buried here, given to the earth. The Hanazuka, the flower mound, where the poems were, where the letters were, where the accumulated record of the attention she received was placed in the ground when she left or died or when the house was cleared. Every spring at Zuishinin there is a festival, the Hanezu Odori, the dance of the light red blossoms. Young women in pink kimono dance the story of Komachi and Fukakusa no Shosho, the 100 nights told in movement, the old legend given new life in the bodies of the young who inherit it. The poetry of impermanence, mono no aware, the phrase that names one of the central qualities of Japanese aesthetic experience, the pathos of things, the particular feeling that arises in the presence of beauty that is passing, of the season that is ending, of the flower that is falling. Komachi's poetry is suffused with this awareness. The color of the flowers has faded while I was looking at the long rains. This is the poem of mono no aware, the beauty present, the beauty passing, the person who is watching when both things happened. The Heian tradition understood that beauty and impermanence are the same thing, not that beauty is diminished by being temporary, but that the temporary is what makes the beauty available to us. The cherry blossoms fall, and they are most beautiful in the falling. The snow on the mountain will melt, and this is why we look at it with the particular attention we give to things we know we cannot keep. Komachi understood this young. Her poems show the awareness of a person who knows, even at the height, that the height is temporary, who loves the beauty of the world with the specific depth of a person who understands that it is already passing. This is not sadness, exactly, or not only sadness, it is the particular attentiveness that awareness of impermanence makes possible, the being here, fully here, in the moment that will not last. The cherry blossoms. Komachi composed a poem about the cherry blossoms that the tradition has connected to a specific moment, a dance performance at the court, at which she is said to have composed it while watching the blossoms fall. The poem is about rain summoned by prayer. She was asked, the legend says, to perform a rain dance, to pray for rain during a drought. She danced. The rain came. And her poem from that time describes the rain and what the rain did to the blossoms. Whether this specific event happened is impossible to verify. What the story preserves is the image of Komachi as someone whose words had power in the world, not merely in the social space of the court exchange, but in the natural world, in the relationship between the human prayer and the rain that answered it. The rain dance, the rain, the blossoms in the rain. This is the Komachi who was more than a beauty, more than a wit, more than the prize at the center of the competition of all those poems. This is the Komachi whose words moved the weather, whose prayer was heard by whatever hears prayers, whose connection to the world ran deeper than the court and its careful ceremonies. Akita and the north, the landscape that produced her, the northern province of Diwa, in what is now Akita and Yamagata Prefecture, was in the 9th century a province at the edge of the world as the Heian court understood the world, not the center, not the place of ceremony and refinement and the careful management of impression. The north, where the winters were long and the snow was serious and the mountains were close and the weather was not the polite weather of the capital's poetry, but the actual weather of a landscape that did not moderate itself for the convenience of the people who lived in it. The tradition of Akita holds Komachi with particular pride. Ogachi, in the south of the prefecture, calls itself her birthplace. There are springs there named after her. There are temples that maintain the connection to her memory with the specific care of a community that understands it has produced someone who became important to the world. The rice of Akita, Akita Komachi, carries her name, named for the beauty of the prefecture and the beauty most associated with it, the beauty that left the north and carried something of it into the court at the center. The north was in her poems, not explicitly. The Heian poetry form did not work explicitly. It worked through the season word, the kigo, the specific plant or bird or weather that carried the season and its associations. But the particular quality of attention to the natural world in Komachi's poems, the way she noticed the rain and the flowers and the light, carries something of the person who grew up in a place where the natural world was impossible to ignore. The Waka form. The poetry Komachi wrote was Waka, Japanese verse, the 31-syllable form that had been developing since the earliest period of Japanese literary culture and had become, by the 9th century, the primary medium through which the educated classes expressed what needed expressing. 5 lines. 5, 7, 5, 7, 7. 31 syllables in total. This is the constraint within which Komachi worked. The extremely narrow space that the form allowed, in which everything had to be accomplished with the minimum of language. The form demands compression. There is no room for the extended development, the paragraph, the argument, the building of case. Everything must be there in the 31 syllables, or it is not there at all. The image, the feeling, the specific turn that gives the poem its point. What compression does, it forces the poet to find the exact word, the exact image, the exact relationship between things that carries the most meaning in the least space. The poems that survive this process are the ones where the compression has not diminished the feeling but concentrated it, the way the small glass of perfume carries more of the garden than the garden itself. Komachi's poems survive this process. They are still concentrated. They still carry the feeling in full, in 31 syllables, across 11 centuries. The Hyakunin Isshu, 100 poets, one poem each, the anthology compiled in the 13th century by the courtier and poet Fujiwara no Teika, who selected what he considered the best single poem from each of 100 poets spanning 4 centuries of Japanese literary history. It has become the most famous poetry collection in Japan, not because scholars chose it, because people played with it. The Karuta game, the card game in which the lower halves of the 100 poems are spread on the floor, and one player reads the upper half, while the others race to find the card with the lower half. This game has been played at the Japanese New Year for centuries. Children learn the poems not by studying them, but by playing with them, by hearing the first lines until the last lines are automatic, until the poems live in the body as well as the mind, in the fingertips that move toward the card before the mind has fully processed the words. Komachi's poem is card number 9, Hana no iro wa utsuri nikeri na. The color of the flowers has faded already. This line has been read aloud in Japanese households at the New Year for centuries. Children have raced across tatami floors to find its lower half. The poem is not in a museum. It is in the body. It is in the game. It is alive. The dream poem again. Omotete wakagoto mo shirazu utatane ni kokoro no uchi ni mono zo kanashiki. Outwardly I show no sign. In my dozing, the inside of my heart is unbearably sad. Another poem from the Kokinshu, the outward self that shows nothing, the inner self that is in grief, the gap between what is visible to others and what is actually occurring inside the person. This poem describes a specifically Heian experience, but it is not only a Heian experience. The court required that the inner life be managed, that the face presented to the world conform to the expectations of the context, that grief or longing or rage be expressed only in the permitted forms of poetry and ceremony, not in the direct expression that the undisciplined heart might prefer. The gap between the surface and the interior was a constant of Heian life. Komachi named it here. Outwardly, nothing. Inside, unbearably sad. And the poem itself is the one permitted breach, the place where the inside comes to the surface, where the managed exterior opens briefly to show what it contains. The poem is the inside. It is what could not be shown outwardly. It is what remains when the performance is over, and the real experience needs a form. Beauty and power. Komachi's beauty was not only an aesthetic quality, it was a form of power. In the world of the Heian court, where advancement depended on connection, on who noticed you and valued you and chose to support you, the beauty that drew attention was the beginning of the possibility of agency. A woman at the Heian court had limited formal power. She could not hold official position. She could not participate in the formal political structures. She was present at court in a specific role, one that was valuable but also precarious, dependent on the continued support of whoever had brought her there. Within these constraints, beauty was leverage, not in the cynical sense of the woman who uses beauty as a calculated tool, but in the structural sense. The beautiful woman was seen, noticed, attended to, given the kind of presence that the court's attention created. The attention brought poems. The poems required response. The exchange of poems was the exercise of the mind that was the real source of power. Komachi's beauty opened the door. Her mind was what she did once she was through it. The tradition has always known this. It is why, 11 centuries later, it is not her face we remember. We have no face to remember. It is the poems, the mind, the 31 syllables that carry more than the most carefully described face could ever carry. The long life. One tradition says Komachi lived to nearly 90. If this is true, if the person who composed the burning poems of longing at the height of the court also lived through the decades that followed, then her life was a very long experience of watching what the poem described. The color of the flowers has faded already. This line, composed perhaps when she was still beautiful, when the fading was still something she observed in the flowers rather than in herself, became in the long life the description of something more personally experienced. She watched the fading. She felt the fading. She lived long enough to understand the poem from the inside in a way she could not have when she first wrote it. The later legends describe her wandering, a woman with her face obscured by the years, traveling the roads of Japan, composing poems, recognized or not recognized, helped or not helped, carrying in her memory the world of the court that was now entirely past, the world that the young poets she encountered had never lived in and could only imagine. This image of the wandering Komachi is one of the most powerful in the entire tradition, not the beautiful young woman at the court, but the old woman on the road, still with the poems, still with the mind, still with the awareness that the color of the flowers fades and the long rains continue, and the watching is both the loss and the only possible response to it. Sleep and poetry. The poem about the dream is also a poem about sleep. Thinking of you, I fell asleep, and you came to me. If I had known it was only a dream, I would never have woken. The person who composed this poem understood something that the sleep scientists would later confirm, and that human beings have always known without confirmation, that sleep is not the absence of experience. It is a different kind of experience. The dream that comes is as real as any waking event, in the sense that it is felt, that it produces the same responses in the body and the heart as the waking encounter would produce. Komachi's dream gave her what waking withheld. The person who was not there in the waking was there in the dream. The meeting that had not happened happened there, and when she woke, the meeting ended. This poem has been read by people in their beds for 11 centuries, people who were lying awake thinking of someone, or who had just woken from a dream they wished had lasted longer, or who were about to sleep and carrying in their mind the face of someone absent. The poem knows their experience. It named it in 31 syllables 1,000 years ago, It names it now. Let the poem come with you into whatever sleep arrives tonight. The dream that comes is as real as the day. The meeting that happens there is a meeting. The face that appears there is the face. Sleep well, dream well, stay as long as you can. The world she left. The Heian court that Komachi knew was not the same court that existed after her time. Change came slowly to the Heian world, but it came. The poets of the 9th century, the generation of Komachi and her contemporaries, worked in a tradition that was still forming itself, still finding the forms that Japanese poetry would refine for the next several centuries. The Kokinshu, published in 905, a generation after Komachi's prime, was the first great imperial anthology, the first systematic attempt to gather and preserve the best of what the tradition had produced. Komachi's work was included. She was one of the voices that defined what the tradition was. After the Kokinshu, more anthologies, more refinements, the long elaboration of the Waka tradition through the Heian period and into the medieval period that followed. The poets who came after Komachi were reading her. They were responding to her. They were composing in the awareness that she had set a standard that stood as a reference point for what the poem could be. She shaped the tradition from inside it. This is the other form of power that the Heian court offered. Not the power of position, not the power of beauty, but the power of the poem that outlasts the position, and the beauty and the person who held them. The poems are the legacy. They are also the presence. She is still here, in them, more fully here than any photograph could make her, more here than any biography could construct. What the tradition kept: a name, a handful of poems, a legend that grew around the name and the poems over 11 centuries. The name, Ono no Komachi. Ono is the clan. Komachi means, roughly, the beautiful woman of the village. It became her name. It became, through her, the word for, a beautiful woman generally. Komachi Buro, a bath so hot it would bring color to the cheeks like Komachi's. Edo Komachi, the beauty of a particular era. Her name became a category. The category became a standard. The poems, 18, survive in the imperial anthologies, perhaps more attributed to her in other collections, with varying degrees of certainty. 18 poems from a lifetime of composition, 18 points of light, out of what must have been a much larger practice, what was lost. The casual poems, the quick responses, the daily work of a life spent in the poem exchange, what survived, the best, the ones that the compilers of the anthologies recognized as having the quality that the tradition was trying to preserve. The legend, accumulated over centuries, drawing to itself the stories that the culture needed to tell about what beauty means and what it costs, and what poetry does that beauty cannot do. The beautiful woman who was also brilliant, the men who pursued her and were redirected by her brilliance, the 100 nights, the old woman on the road, the poems that remained when everything else was gone. This is Komachi as the tradition constructed her, and the construction is true enough for 11 centuries, true enough for tonight. The fading color, hana no iro wa utsuri nikeri na. The color of the flowers has faded already. This line, the specific Japanese word utsuro, to change color, to fade, carries more than fading. It carries the sense of transformation, of moving from one state to another, of the beautiful thing not destroyed, but altered into something else. The flower does not disappear. its color changes. What was vivid becomes muted. What was present becomes past. And the second part, Wagami yo ni furu nagame seshi mani. While I have grown old in the world, gazing at the long rains. The word furu means both to fall and to grow old, to pass time. The rain falls. She grows old. Both are in the single word. The nagame, the long rains, also contains naga, the word for long, and mi, for gazing. The long rains and the long gazing are the same word. The poem is a puzzle of double meanings that the Japanese reader holds simultaneously, all of them true at once. The rain falling, time passing, beauty fading, the gazing that is both the loss and the only way of attending to the loss with the respect it deserves. This is what the poem keeps saying to every person who reads it. While you were looking, things were changing. While you were attending, time was passing. This is not a failure. This is what attention is. This is what time is. This is what it means to be alive. Komachi and sleep. She is the poet of the dream, the poet of the night hour, the poet of the moment between waking and sleeping, when the mind has released its grip on the managed day and the feeling that the day suppressed comes back. The poem of the dream is a poem composed in the half-sleep, in the state between. She fell asleep thinking of someone. The dream came. The person came in the dream. She woke. She wrote the poem. This is the sequence. Not, she thought, then composed. But she felt, then slept, then dreamed, then woke, then put the dream into the form that the tradition made available. The poem preserved the dream. Not the dream's images exactly, not the specific details of what the dream contained, but the dream's essential truth, that the person came, that the coming was real, that the waking ended it, that if she had known, she would have stayed. This poem has been read in the dark before sleep by people lying in their beds for 11 centuries, people who understood exactly what she was describing, people who had fallen asleep thinking of someone, people who had woken from a dream that gave them what waking withheld. The poem travels across the centuries because the experience it describes does not change. The technology changes. The language changes. The world changes beyond recognition. The experience of falling asleep thinking of someone and hoping they come in the dream, this does not change. Komachi named it. It is still named. The women poets of Heian. Komachi was not alone. The 9th and 10th centuries produced a remarkable concentration of women writers in the Japanese literary tradition, a concentration that has no real parallel in any other culture of the same period. Murasaki Shikibu, who wrote the tale of Genji in the early 11th century, the work that many consider the first novel in world literature. Sei Shona Gon, whose Pillow Book, a collection of observations and lists and reflections and sharp commentary, is one of the defining documents of the Heian sensibility. Izumi Shikibu, whose poems of love and grief stand among the most intense expressions of feeling in the entire classical tradition. Komachi preceded them. She was the poet of the generation before the great flowering of Heian women's writing. She helped establish the possibility of what they would do. A woman poet taken seriously at the highest level, included in the imperial anthology, named among the 6 great poets of the age. This mattered, not in a way that anyone announced, not through a declaration or a policy, but in the way that precedent works, by existing, by being undeniable, by demonstrating that the thing is possible because it has already happened. Komachi happened. The women who came after could look at her and know that the space existed. The rain and the night, the nagame, the long rains. In the poem, the rain is both the specific autumn rain of Japan, the long gray rains of October and November that fall steadily and turn the world a particular shade of muted color, and the gazing, the sustained looking outward at the rain, the state of mind that the rain induces. The Japanese autumn rain is a specific weather, not the dramatic summer storm with lightning and wind and the sudden violence of the sky. The autumn rain falls quietly. It falls for days. It is the rain that settles in, that makes the world gray and still and interior. The kind of rain that turns people toward their inner lives, that makes the outside world recede a little, and the inner world become more present. Komachi wrote her poem in this rain, or she wrote it in the memory of this rain, in the state of mind that this rain produces, in the awareness that while the rain fell, and she looked outward at it, something was happening inside that she was only noticing after the fact. The rain is falling tonight somewhere. In Japan, in October, the long rains fall. They have been falling for as long as there have been autumn rainfalls. In Japan, the same rain, the same gray, the same quality of the world, going quiet, and the inside becoming louder. Komachi listened to this rain. She wrote about it. The poem is still here, and the rain still falls. 11 centuries. The number is worth sitting with. Komachi composed her poems in the 9th century. The 9th century, the Viking Age in Europe, before the Norman conquest of England, before the Crusades, before the Black Death, before the printing press, before the discovery of the Americas, before almost everything that the modern world considers its history. And the poem is here, not in a museum case, not behind glass, not accessible only to scholars with specialist knowledge, this guy in the card game at New Year, in the school curriculum, in the temples of Kyoto where the festivals maintain it, in the mouths of children who have memorized it without being told why it matters. How does a poem survive 11 centuries? Not by being protected, by being used, by passing from the anthology to the game, to the child, to the adult, and back to the child. By finding, in each new generation, the people who recognize it, who hear the first line and know what comes next, not because they were taught, but because the experience it describes is their experience too. The color of the flowers has faded already, while meaninglessly I have grown old in the world, gazing at the long rains. You have heard this now. It has been in your ears tonight. Whether or not you remember it tomorrow, whether or not you carry it into your waking life, it has done what poems do. It has named something that was already in you and given it a form that the night can hold. Komachi's poem is in you now. It has been in countless people. It will be in others after. This is what the tradition keeps. This is what 11 centuries means. The color of the flowers has faded already, while meaninglessly I have grown old in the world, gazing at the long rains. This poem was composed in the 9th century. It has been in the world for 1100 years. It will be in the world after you and I are gone. Ono no Komachi, the name we know, the face we do not know, the mind we can still meet in the 31 syllables that she left. She came from the north, from the snows of Dewa province, and she brought with her the particular attention of a person who grew up in a landscape that did not let you ignore it. She came to the capital. She was seen. She saw. She composed poems that named things that needed naming, that the language had been waiting to say. She grew old. She may have wandered. She may have lived to nearly 90, long enough to understand her own poems from the inside. She left the poems, in the anthology, in the card game, in the play, in the festival at Zuishinin every March, when the young women in pink kimono dance the story, and the story lives again in their moving. The long rains are falling somewhere. The flowers are fading. The dream is waiting on the other side of sleep. The poem is there too, in the dark, in the quiet, already in you.